everybody. My name is Lily. I'm here at the Alaska Wildlife Conservation Center. I'm a safe distance from anyone around me, so I'm going to go ahead and take off my mask so that you guys can better hear me for story time today. Before I get started, I wanted to take advantage of this opportunity to introduce you to Arnold. He's one of the moose living with us here at the Conservation Center. He's 2 years old this year, and he was orphaned out near Palmer, Alaska, so he was bottle raised by our animal care staff here and has a permanent home. I'm glad he decided to join us for story time today. Today, I'm going to be reading 2 books for you all. The first one is This Moose Belongs to Me by Oliver Jeffers. And before I get started with it, I just wanted to throw out a big thank you to Tidal Wave Books, who's sponsoring this event for us this summer, so thank you, Tidal Wave. This book belongs to me by Oliver Jeffers. Wilfred owned a moose. He hadn't always owned a moose. The moose came to him a while ago, and he just knew that it was meant to be his. He thought he would call him Marcel. He began following Marcel, explaining the rules of how to be a good pet. Much of the time, it seemed as though the moose wasn't listening, but Wilfred knew he was, mostly because he followed rule number 4 very well, not making too much noise while Wilfred plays his record collection. Sometimes the moose wasn't a very good pet. He generally ignored rule number 7, going whichever way Wilfred wants to go. The moose had a very good sense of direction, and Wilfred did not. And because the moose was particularly poor on rule number 7, section B, maintaining a certain proximity to home, Wilfred quickly learned to bring some strings along on their outings so he could find his way back again. Sometimes the moose was an excellent pet. He had no trouble with rule number 11, providing shelter from the rain. That must be a pretty tall moose. Or rule number 16, knocking down things that are out of Wilfred's reach. Good work, Wilfred. Passing some apples. One day, as Wilfred discussed their plans for the coming year on a particularly long walk, he made a terrible discovery. What could it be? Someone else thought she owned the moose. "Rodrigo, you're back," she said. Wilfred was dumbstruck. This moose was Marcel, not Rodrigo. The old lady was mistaken, and Wilfred thought it only proper that he correct her. "This moose belongs to me," he explained. And to prove it, he called Marcel. "Heel!" But the moose did not respond. He seemed more interested in the old lady. She's feeding him an apple. "Good Rodrigo." Fine. Embarrassed and enraged, Wilfred rushed off for home. But in his haste, and miles away from anywhere, he tripped over his own string and got tangled up. Ah! And there he lay. Wilfred was beginning to get a little bit worried, and it was getting late, and soon the monsters would be out. He had just ruled out his last options. A bear with an axe isn't going to work. Little penguins aren't going to come for him. No sawtooth dolphins. When along came the moose. He performed rule number 73 brilliantly, rescuing your owner from perilous situations. All was forgiven, and perhaps, Wilfred admitted, he never really owned the moose anyway. With that in mind, he and Moose reached a compromise. The moose would agree to all of Wilfred's rules. You can see Wilfred imagining that. Whenever it suited him. And there goes the moose on his next adventure. Dominic, you're back, and you brought an apple. The end. So this is an interesting story. I think it has a really great lesson for us, is that Wilfred thought that he owned the moose, but by the end he realized that you can't own a moose or any wildlife, which are like the animals that we have living with us here. Arnold, for example, he lives with us and he works with some of our animal care staff, but do you think we own him? I don't think so. I think he's still a wild moose, and he only does whatever he wants to do when it suits him as well. For our second book, I have Looking for a Moose by Phyllis Root with illustrations by Randy Cecil. This one is a little bit of a scavenger hunt. Do you think, can you find him? Let's find out together. Looking for a Moose. Have you ever seen a moose? A long, leggy moose? A branchy antler moose? A dinner diving, bulgy nose moose? No, we've never, ever seen a moose, and we really want to see a moose. Let's go! We put on our hats, we pull out our boots, and they're off on an adventure. We look in the woods, tromp, stomp, tromp, stomp. The treesy, breezy, tilty, stilty, wobbly, knobbly woods. Do you think you see any evidence of a moose in here? They might be pretty good at hiding. We look and we look, but it's just no use. We don't see any long, leggy moose. Now what? We'll look in the swamp for a dinner diving moose. We roll up our pants, we take off our boots, and we wade in the swamp. Squeesh, squoosh, squeesh, squoosh. The sloppy, gloppy, lily ploppy, slurpy, glurpy swamp. Do you think you see a moose? I don't know. We look and we look, but it's just no use. We don't see any long, leggy, dinner diving moose. Do you think there's a moose in that swamp? Maybe. Now what? We'll look in the bushes for a branchy antler moose. We roll down our pants, we button up our sleeves. We scrape through the bushes, scritch, scratch, the brambly, ambly, bunchy, scrunchy, scrubby, shrubby bushes. Do you think you see a moose in here? How about here? We look and we look, but it's just no use. We don't see any long, leggy, dinner diving, branchy antler moose. Now what? We'll look on the hillside for a bulgy nose moose. We take off our hats, we tighten our packs. We scramble up the hillside, trip, trop, the rocky, blocky, lumpy, bumpy, fuzzy, muzzy hillside. There they go. We look and we look, but it's just no use. We'll never, ever see a moose. Do you see any moose in there? Maybe. Ooh, what's that? Look there! A long, leggy, dinner diving, branchy antler, bulgy nose moose. There he is. Do you think he was there the whole time? And a moose, and a moose, and a moose. We've never, ever seen so many moose. Look at them all. Now that they've spotted one, they see them all. The end. Speaking of moose, our branchy antlered moose just took a lay down in the grass. You can imagine how from farther away it might be kind of hard to spot them. I think that this story tells us a lot about observing wildlife. Sometimes we go places and it's hard to spot something, but as soon as you see one, maybe the first little bird you spot on a tree, suddenly you might see more of them because you know what you're looking for. Well, thank you all so much for joining us for this week's story time at the Alaska Wildlife Conservation Center. Both of these stories are actually available for sale in our gift store. So if you make it down here in person to visit us and check out our gift shop, you can find these books and other great storybooks like them. We'll see you next week, and I hope you guys enjoy the rest of your week.